So just really quick before I get into anything else, if you're here for class credit, it's really important that you specifically also sign in on this paper so that I can send the appropriate information to the Alright, so just a brief outline of what today's going to look like. We'll do a really quick introduction about the office and who we are, what we do. I'll tell you a little bit about the FIU series, its purpose, and like why we do it. We'll talk a bit about some future events coming up in the office. And then I'll introduce our guest speaker, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. And really important, we're going to have some evaluations that we're going to be handing out towards the end of the presentation. It's really important that you fill it out for us. It's a separate evaluation from what Justin gave you. This was specifically for our office. A lot of what we do is funded through student government, so it's really important that we get student feedback on what we do so we can show that, hey, students are interested or like what we do. Alright, so our office is part of multicultural programming services, and we specifically are in charge of the LGBTQA Initiatives. We have one full-time staff person, our associate director, Dr. Gisela Vega, is in the back. If you haven't met her, she's awesome. She also teaches in LGBT, what is it?
LGBT and Beyond. Women and Gender Studies. It counts as your cross-cultural course, so if you're looking for something fun to take.
Yeah. And so students get great reviews, so definitely look out for that. We also have 2 graduate assistants who work in the office. They're part-time, but oftentimes we're doing a lot more work. We have my counterpart, Richard Moreno in the back, who's at MMC. And then myself, I'm Sebastian Ojeda, and I'm here at the beautiful Biscayne campus. And then depending on the semester, we'll also have various like classroom students, interns. This semester we're looking to have at MMC we have Danny Della Cuesta, and here at BBC we have Valerie Beal to step out really quick, but they're like a really big help and they're really committed to what we do and helping us out. And we also have student volunteers who want to do some hours or are passionate about what we do and they get involved. So if you're interested in helping out with our office or being involved, just send one of us an email, and there's always ways that we can get you to be doing something. And so here at BBC, our office is located on the 2nd floor, 253. In GC, it's 216, and it's Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. And we might not be the Kardashians, they just looked up with us on social media. We got our Facebook page. I'll pull it up a little later so you can kind of see. But it's LGBTQA Initiatives at Florida International University. If you also want to follow us on Instagram, we do have an account there. It's FIU LGBTQA. And so the 3D series, the D's stands for Die, Discuss, Deliberate. And it's really an opportunity for us to give you presentations that are going to increase your education, increase awareness, and they really touch upon important topics, either in the LGBT community or anything that would be related. We try to also keep an eye out for things that might be going on in society recently and addressing those hot topics. And it's just an opportunity for people to kind of come together, learn a bit, and enjoy each other's company and get some free food. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our facilitator for today. We will be presenting on like positive relationships. What does that look like? What does that mean? And then also some behaviors that you shouldn't be allowed to in your relationship. So, Justin, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, my name is Justin Santoli. I work as a peer educator for the Counseling and Psychological Services Center. I've been doing it for 4 years. I just graduated, degree in elementary education, so you have some background about me. Too bad I don't want to do that for a career, so too late. But yeah, and then applying for my master's in higher education in the fall, so we'll see how that goes. Part-time substitute teacher, so good stuff. And so yeah, I've been doing this for 4 years. What we basically do in the peer education program is that we have 2 really main jobs. There's a team of about 16 of us, 16 peer educators, all undergrad I started my sophomore year of college, so I was undergrad when I started, we do workshops on a lot of different mental health topics. We're extensively trained on a lot of mental health topics and also how it intersects with minority groups and things like that. So we're trained on depression, suicide prevention, eating disorders, sexual assault, awareness, relationship abuse, stalking, I mean anything under the sun that relates to mental health basically. We do bi-weekly training, so we're constantly being trained on new things, so it's really cool. And we also do tabling events. We do a lot of events to raise awareness about these issues based on the week. You know, if it's like Domestic Violence Awareness Week, we'll do something for that, or other things. So we just wrapped up our 50 Shades of Dating event. Did anyone go to that? We did it a couple of times up here, not a lot, but we tried. That's a really fun. Yeah, the speed dating thing. So really cool. We basically set up like a mock speed dating thing where our peer educators we act out sort of, and obviously we tell you at the time so you're not like thrown off guard, but we sort of act out emotional abuse situations, kind of red flags that people might say in a potentially emotionally abusive relationship. So it just meant to give you an idea about how these behaviors sometimes start off really subtle, and then they can oftentimes escalate if they're not kept in check. And I'm actually going to talk about some of those red flags today. So really cool stuff, and we have cool t-shirts, a lot of free stuff, food, t-shirts, lanyards, a whole bunch of cool stuff. So definitely check us out on our social media, which will also be up here on one of the slides. And I also have a bunch of flyers outside on the table outside, so on your way out, please feel free to check out my little corner of information, because it's going to summarize pretty much what I'm talking about today. Today I have this specialized presentation for you guys, because we're going to talk about healthy relationships, like Sebastian said. Also some of the red flags about what's not considered a healthy relationship, and also what the differences and similarities are between how they operate within LGBT communities versus how they operate between non-LGBT communities. Because there are some intersections, but there's also some things that LGBT communities deal with specifically, that are unique to them. So we're going to talk about those things. First of all, I want to talk about what the Counseling and Psychological Services Center is, because a lot of you guys I can see or I should assume I know, are students. So with that, you pay a $90 health fee every semester or every year in your tuition. And with that, you get a lot of free and confidential resources available to you. So it's really important that you know what those are. So basically our mission is we really work to provide mental health counseling to all students. We really want to make sure that your college experience is a safe one, both mentally and physically. So with that, we work to provide awareness, education. We try to educate students. That's what the peer education program does, because we believe that the best ways to reduce these crime statistics is through education. A lot of it has to do from what I've seen from tabling in and out, day in and day out, is that a lot of people just don't know. A lot of people just don't realize that certain behaviors are toxic or are not healthy, or even when talking about consent, you don't realize those gray areas are things you want to be on the lookout for because of culture and other factors. So again, I really want to stress that our services are confidential, so they're always going to present you with options. We have licensed therapists at our center, so it's not just like me. I'm like super unqualified to give advice. But these are licensed therapists with their PhDs and their licenses that are there to provide services for you. They're always going to present you with options. So if you, for example, come to us and say, hey, I'm dealing with this abusive situation, they're not going to tell you, okay, you need to go to the police right now. They'll tell you, this is an option available to you, but it's ultimately your decision. So that's really important to us, making sure that we're not there to try to trick you into getting a police report or something that you're not ready to do. Because it could also, statistically, sometimes that can put you in more danger. So we understand that. And it's free of charge, so it's free because you paid for it, right? You already paid for it with your student fee. So that's kind of like the theme of college in general, right? Anything that's free, technically, you probably already paid for it in your tuition. It's available to FIU students primarily. Our Victim Empowerment Program services that offers resources for students who are dealing with relationship abuse and violence and things like that. Those are for faculty or visitors who experience an incident on campus, but most of our resources, sorry to the staff out here, the general counseling services are just for FIU students. And again, they're tailor-made to what your specific needs are. So our victim empowerment program services and our just general counseling services can be accessed through, there's actually a little bit dated, so I apologize, but we pretty much only do appointments now because we have a lot of staff, you know, on our payroll, but we also have 44,000 FIU students. So spread among 2 campuses or more, and our center is only on 2 campuses, this one in the South Campus. So in order to maximize your time so that you're not sitting around, you know, waiting forever for a therapist to become available, it's best to call ahead, especially on this campus because we have a lot less limited staff up here than how small this campus is. We do appointments only, so you just call ahead and say, hey, can I see someone at this time, and they'll work out the best time frame for you. That way you show up, you get what you need, and then, you know, your time is being used efficiently. If you are in a crisis situation, so something happens or whatever, and you don't know what to do, we have a 24-hour crisis hotline. It's right up here. That's on some of the flyers outside, so that's why I recommend grabbing some on your way out. It's a very easy number to remember. 348 is the FIU line, and then 3000, super easy. So you can call us any time of day. It could be 3 a.m. on New Year's Day. If you call, someone will be available and on call to assist you in the best way that they can. All right? This whole thing is like giving me like. I have no idea. So anyway, more of the services available. Again, we can provide counseling for you, just general counseling if you're dealing with something related to sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking. I don't know what's going on in this area right now. Also accompaniment, so it's not just general counseling. Our the Victim Empowerment Program, or VEP, I'm just going to call it VEP from now on. The services are for.
I think we should break out.
It's upstairs.
I have no idea. I'm like kind of nervous to open that door too, so no, I think they're just loading something or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, so our VEP services, we can also provide accompaniment. So let's say you come to us and again, always your decision, if you need help filing a restraining order, going to a hospital to get a rape kit run. The nearest rape treatment center from here is the Nancy J. Cotterman Center. I don't know the exact address, but I know it's the Broward Center. And then if you're down by the South Campus, it's the Roxy Bolton Rape Treatment Center in Jackson Memorial Hospital. And so we can accompany you there to get a rape kit run if you want to. Remember, if you get a rape kit run, that doesn't mean it automatically gets reported to the police. You have the option to choose. The rape kit is just for collecting evidence. So keep that in mind too. Don't feel nervous if someone suggests that to you, because that does not automatically mean a police report is being filed. If you need help finding a lawyer or a legal process, student conduct hearings, if your situation relates to your safety living on campus, they can work with the residence halls and things like that to, you know, do whatever you need to do to make yourself safe. And again, very specific to what your needs are. So this is not even close to a comprehensive list. Okay? Okay, so also a few other things we can do. We can work with professors, because trauma obviously affects, it can affect the student's academic life, social life, things like that. So if you're really struggling because of a situation that you're seeing a VEP counselor for, they can work with the professor to either drop a class or get an extension or whatever. And that's not, again, just like, oh, I was lazy and didn't do this assignment on time. Like if you're seeing us for a legitimate thing that's going on, then we'll work with, and the professors are all taught and they know that that's something that they need to accommodate if the student is being seen with that. And with keeping with confidentiality, they're not going to reveal any details about your case that isn't absolutely necessary. So the most they'll say sometimes is, you know, hey, we're working with your student, they need this from you, and done, you know. We also have a very good relationship with the Disability Resource Center, so because obviously trauma can cause issues and things like that. So we have a very good relationship with a lot of departments on campus, so that's really good for that. Okay, more accompaniment. I kind of went through this already. So, some of the general services we provide: individual therapy. We also have group counseling. We have over 11 different groups available. A whole range of them. You can check them out on our website to find out what groups. We also do couples counseling. If both of you are registered FIU students, then you can receive couples counseling. Otherwise, you know, only students who are registered can receive counseling services. So you both have to be registered FIU students. However, you can still see us for an issue you're having with your partner who's not an FIU student and just work on your end of it. Okay, cool. So again, our group therapy, this is one of our LGBT groups, so it's called the Accepting Ourselves group. So if that's something, if you prefer to work within a group setting, definitely call us and find out how you can get screened into this group, because it's really cool. I've heard very good things about our group therapy. Okay, does anyone have any questions about the counseling services or anything like that before I get into it? Okay, oh yes.
So I just heard that there's a Panthers for Recovery student group.
Yes.
Is that related to CAPS?
Not explicitly, but we do have a very good relationship with them, and we always try to promote them because they're a new student organization on campus, a student club on campus. They're called Panthers for Recovery, in case you didn't hear her. And what they do is they base their focus is on talking about recovery and addiction and things like that. So typically, their meetings are typically sort of like AA style or NA style, if anyone has ever been to these kinds of meetings. And they have a lot of guest speakers that come and talk about their experiences and do awareness about addiction and things like that. So they're really cool. They've done sober tailgating has anyone gone to the tailgates this semester yet? So they're really cool. They do sober tailgating, like just outside the parking lot, and they have like pizza and super chill, and because you don't always have to drink or do other things to have fun. So yeah, okay. So what is a healthy relationship? So I'm gonna talk sort of like about the positives and the negatives, right? Because that's kind of my specialty tends to be a lot on like the negative aspects of it. So like I had to quickly go in and find like, okay, what's about a positive relationship? But so before I go into the next slide, what were some aspects that you think would be important or sort of like a pillar of a positive, healthy relationship?
Transparency in the relationship.
Okay, transparency. And having a common ground, sure. I mean, maybe not necessarily, right? But you know the phrase opposites attract, so people who have absolutely nothing in common can sometimes work it out really well, right? Yeah? Honesty, a huge one, right? Being honest with yourself and honest about your feelings and your person's feelings. What else? You were saying something? Communication. Hello? Communication is so important, right?
Affirmative consent?
Affirmative consent is important all the time in any context, right? Because consent, if it's coerced, is not really consent. You're pressuring someone or making them feel like they have to do something that's not healthy because you're manipulating them. Good. Anything else? Okay. Oop. No, it's okay. So so some of the pillars so sort of the big three ones is the proper communication. So really the gist of it is using I statements. Those are really important, right? When you're having and I'm saying this in terms of conflict resolution, right? I statements are really important because if you're outright accusing someone or saying, think about the differences between when you're saying, you're doing this and it's upsetting me, or versus, well, when you do this, it makes me feel this way. You see how like the shift is, you're saying the same thing essentially, but the shift is a lot different and the approach is so much different because, I mean, think about it. If someone approaches you and accuses you outright of doing something, you're probably going to get on the defensive right away and be like, okay, well, screw you. I don't want to hear you talk. What is this? But if a person's just telling you, hey, this makes me feel that way, you can't really counter that because the person's just talking about their feelings. So that's really important when you're having a conflict or anything like that. Those I statements are really beneficial because it comes with that open and honest dialogue about talking about your feelings. Hey, it makes me feel really upset when this happens or when you do this, or sometimes I feel like this way. Versus sometimes you do this and that's not okay. That will end a conversation. It'll be a very short conversation. Okay. Thank you. So. The other thing is honesty. So it's really hard for us to admit fault in ourselves, right? I mean, it's kind of a very natural process or thing about human beings. It's not a good one, but it's a natural thing that, it's difficult to own up to our part in a situation or our own fault, So honesty is really important in being and saying and having the foresight to be able to say, okay, this part, this is the part where I screwed up. And not having that but afterward, right? Okay, yeah, I did this, but you also, right? Again, it's because then you're not having effective communication. These all really affect each other, right? So honesty is so important with yourself and being able to really have that perspective. A lot of people don't, and those people, especially if you're on the very extreme that you have absolutely no perspective at all, that you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes. Empathy. It's empathy, right? I mean, we'll say, okay, yeah, damn, I really messed this part up, and I can see how it led to that person reacting this way that in turn upset me. So it's really important to be able to navigate that, and with good communication, you can navigate that with your partner and say, okay, you know, I'm finding where the blame falls appropriately, okay? And then a willingness to resolve. When you are approaching a conflict with your partner, if the approach is not, there's a situation that I'm willing to work with you to resolve versus I'm accusing you and you messed up and you need to apologize to me, that's not gonna work, right? Because then again, it leads to that very one-sided, like, that defensive situation. That person's not gonna wanna hear you, that's gonna shut down the conversation. But if you're both going into it and saying like, look, I really do wanna resolve this. You know, you're in a relationship with someone or whatever, and because you care about that person, you want to fix the situation appropriately, right? So that's really important. Now again, why are these things sometimes so difficult for people to do? We're all guilty of it in some level or another, right? Because again, it's human nature. But what about humans make it so hard sometimes to follow these things, or it's not natural to some of us? Emotions.
Like you don't want to make yourself seem like a bad person.
You don't want to make yourself, so that would be what I just starts with an E. There's a word, 3-letter word. Ego. It's our egos, right? Who wants to? I mean, it's hard. We don't want to admit that we screwed up here or there, or admit fault, or we're afraid that if we do, then it's like the rejection aspect. So our egos tend to get in the way of a lot of it. So it's ego and fear. You know, so we are unfortunately sometimes very egotistical in nature. You know, we have our things that we think we're good at, and we have these things going on, but then when we're confronted with that and suddenly it's, wait, I'm also at fault here, it's kind of like a big like, whoa, you know? So it's really important to be able to, it's just practice, you know? And it has to come from that place of you care about this person. So what's more important? Is it your ego and making yourself seem like no, I'm the victim here, they're the ones who completely messed up, or saying, okay, it's obviously not so black and white, there's a give and take, like in all things. Okay, so unhealthy things, unhealthy aspects of behaviors in relationships is making assumptions. So again, don't assume you know what's going on in that person's brain. Let's say that, like a sort of very simple example, like they stood you up for a lunch date, and that upset you. And the first thing you assume maybe is something like, okay, well they're cheating on me, or they just didn't care enough. Like, why didn't they leave early or whatever? So you're making all these assumptions, and you're sort of creating their side of the argument in your head beforehand already. You're almost setting yourself up for failure later when you go to have that conversation. Because it could be anything, right? It could be stuck in traffic. They could have been held up at work. It happens. It's not, you know, it sucks, but it happens. You know, so making assumptions without any evidence yet to support it can be really. I had a teacher once in high school who she was my women's studies teacher, so it just makes this whole thing kind of funnier. But that she went to work one day to teach high school, and she had left her phone at home. She told us that she gets home and she has a million messages from her boyfriend and phone calls and things like that. And throughout the day, he was making these assumptions because she wasn't answering her phone. And she got home and he had broken up with her on the phone.
Oh my God.
She was like, okay, no, I mean, it was like, okay, well, I mean, I left my phone at home, whatever, good riddance to him, right? That was her perspective. But yeah, so it's just like, this guy was making all these assumptions and going crazy, and there was, I mean, we've all left our phones around before and go off the grid, so, you know, it happens. So those assumptions are really important. Loss of respect. If you just don't respect your partner or your partner's feelings, then that's already a toxic situation. Or vice versa, if your partner doesn't respect you, how are you going to make any progress? When you're in a relationship with someone, you do put a certain degree of trust in that person, don't you? So you should, I mean, with trust comes a respect. So, you know, it's about being able to give the benefit of the doubt. And talking about in those like murky situations, not like if you, I mean, obviously like if you get home and they're in bed with someone else and you're in a monogamous relationship, I should say that, then like that's a different situation. But, you owe it to your partner to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because if you care for them, you love them, you should respect them a little bit enough to have that willingness to resolve, right? It goes back to those healthy relationships. Emotional instability, so I mean, we go through a lot of things in our life, right? It's not just relationships we're dealing with work stresses, school can be really stressful, our own mental health issues, you know. One of the most common symptoms among a lot of mental health disorders is like emotional instability, so being unable to regulate your emotions. And that's really difficult and obviously that's not your fault, but it's something that you want to be on the lookout for and work through with your partner. Because there's a difference between, I've seen people who have those mental health issues, but they use it as sort of a crutch or an excuse, versus saying, I know I have this problem, and those behaviors are not okay, and I'm going to try to, sort of work through them with you. But then there's other people who will say, no, well, I have this issue, and you need to just deal with it, or I'm going to be like abusive to you, and that's whatever, because it's not my fault. So there is a difference in perspective, right, in how you deal with those things, and that's really, and then obviously violence, right? Emotional violence, physical violence are really bad indicators of unhealthy relationships. So if you're having temper outbursts, throwing things, or breaking things when you're angry, those are really not healthy, because that's not a healthy coping strategy. Yeah, they're not healthy coping mechanisms, because then you're eventually usually a big warning indicator that person's gonna take that out on you. And then you don't have those lines of communication, and this is the whole game up, really. Okay. Sure. Okay, so now going into relationship violence, and I'm going to talk about sort of the legal definitions and things like that, and sort of again go more in depth about the red flags you want to look out for. So the Florida statute, you don't have to read this whole super long paragraph because that's just the wording of the law, but it's basically a pattern. Domestic violence is listed as a pattern of behavior, different types of behaviors. It can be sexual battery, stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, anything like that. These are the criteria that you have to meet for it to be defined as domestic violence. So my presentation, I'm talking about sort of general relationship violence. So I'm not just following the letter of the law, because relationships can be anything: friendships, family, romantic partners, sexual partners, anything like that. So it has to be, so for domestic violence, it has to be either a spouse, a relative by blood or marriage, anyone that you've had a child with, regardless of whether you've lived with that person, or someone who has lived in the same family unit as you. So roommates count as domestic violence because you're living with that person. So our counselor sometimes will have to address domestic violence situations of people living in the dorms or in off-campus housing as they're living together. So that's important to keep in mind, because you're sharing a space with that person. You're living with that person, literally. Even if you never see each other, you're just living in the same space. Okay, so dating violence means violence between people who have or have had a continuing and significant romantic or intimate relationship. It has to have existed within the past 6 months. There has to have been some form of affection or sexual relationship, again, sexual involvement. Again, these are sort of the letters of the law, and I have these up just so that you guys can see them and understand them. But we're talking also in a general sense here, so keep that in mind. Don't think wait, I don't need that criteria. Does that not mean it counts as dating violence? Don't read too much into it there. But what is important here is that our studies show that not all relationship violence is the same. It's not all like that, tragic, like you see in movies. I'm sure we've all seen a lot of LGBT films, and it's always so depressing, right? They're mostly so depressing, and they're always the extreme versions of these kinds of relationships or situations. So, sometimes it's not. Sometimes actually both people in a relationship are doing abusive factors. Sometimes both people are the abusers and both people are the victims, Sometimes it's just common couples violence. It's just disagreements that escalates. It would be strange if you're in a relationship with someone and you have no conflicts, no fights, no disagreements whatsoever. I guess it could happen, but it's a little strange, right? Conflict in some degree is healthy because you're challenging yourself in your relationship. But sometimes, you get into an argument with a person, they just piss each other off, and then an argument escalates, and that happens sometimes. That doesn't necessarily always mean it's okay, domestic violence, oh my gosh, right? It is something you want to address, definitely, because it could lead to a pattern. And that's actually what the key word is there. The difference between that and other forms of violence is it's a pattern of recurring behaviors that happen over time. So, and like I said, sometimes it's mutual. Sometimes both partners engage in the violence. It's not always like the one dominant person, you know, controlling and doing these abusive tactics, and the other person is just the, oh, woe is me victim. Sometimes it's both people doing it, you know, unprovoked. So that's important to keep in mind too, and also within yourself and when you're thinking about, when you're trying to understand relationships and stuff, and it goes with that mutual, with that honesty with yourself, right? Am I doing anything that is not, you know, kind of a red flag or anything like that too? If you're not, then that's good, but, you know, sometimes it is both people. Okay, so so the most extreme form of relationship violence, it's what we call coercive controlling domestic violence, which is the most dangerous form, because that's when it's that long-term pattern of abusive, manipulative behaviors that a person is using. I've got the definition right here. So again, it's a pattern that a person uses to maintain power and control. Those are two big key words. The message behind all forms of domestic violence is, I have this power, and I'm going to use this power to establish power and control over you. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to use those abuse tactics, or manipulation tactics, because abuse is very manipulative in nature. The whole end game is really to get a person to become dependent on you, and to think as you think, and to feel that it's their fault, they brought this on themselves, and you know they have to rely on you for everything. Yes, okay. So now, also important to understand is that not all relationship or domestic violence is physical, right? We typically don't think about that way. Also, because you know the cops unfortunately can't, you know, when they show up when they answer a domestic violence call, they typically have to just arrest the person who has the marks. But what we fail to understand there, what that doesn't take into account, is the emotional abuse factor, right? Emotional abuse always includes, relationship violence always includes emotional abuse. It's always the first type of abuse to occur, and it's always present throughout all forms of relationship violence. Okay? Abusive partners, they typically will railroad discussions, so like go off topic or talk about things that are irrelevant to make it seem like your fault. It's a manipulation tactic, right? They'll tell you, again, it goes to that whole like, no, you're doing this wrong and this is what you've done wrong and you need to fix it for this relationship to work. And then there's no blame on the abuser, right? It's all on them, it's all their fault. And that is, again, a pattern of, you know, you typically see this a lot, like in movies or unfortunately sometimes in real life, where you know a person is physically abused by their partner, and then they say, "Oh, you brought this on yourself," or like, "Why did you make me do that?" It's still their fault, even though they're the one who threw the hit, you know. So just a couple quick statistics. So women accounted for 85% of relationship violence. So it can happen to anyone. Statistically, it does happen more to women. Women 16 to 24 are the most vulnerable, so a lot of our statistics when we're talking about stalking, sexual assault, anything like that, college-age students typically tend to be at the highest risk factor, so anywhere between 16 and 24 years old.